We're gonna just give you the green light.
Safe bar. Single. All right, yeah. Okay. Here we go. They're coming. This for their coming.
Okay. We're good. All right, it is 6:31. This is Robert Stevenson. I'm going to call to order the FY23 budget presentation. So we're going to start the presentation with Superintendent Willard. Superintendent Willard, when you're ready, it's all yours.
All right, thank you. And thank you very much, everybody who is online tonight. And for those of you who actually came to the meeting, we appreciate it. We're going to start off the FY23 budget presentation with a projected timeline of how our budgets work in the regional school district. So we have to have a draft budget to the school committee on March 1st, which is always a tenuous task because we don't get the cherry sheet from the governor until about the third week in January. So there's a lot of work done between the third week in January and getting a draft budget to the school committee on March 1st. We have numerous FinCom meetings with our school committee, finance committee, and we go over their priorities and we draft a budget. Today is March 15th, and this is our public budget hearing for the public to ask us some questions on the budget before the school committee votes, which will be 2 weeks from now on the 29th. As we know, in April, the House Ways and Means budget comes out, which usually changes the governor's budget. And then in May, we present the budget that is approved by the school committee on March 29th at all 3 town meetings. In order for the operational budget to pass, it needs to be approved by 2 of our 3 towns. And in order for the capital budget to be passed, it needs to be approved by all 3 towns because we're going to be assuming debt. So I always like to link our district budget to our educational initiatives because our budget should be reflective of what it is that we are working on in our school district, and they need to be connected like a through line. So we always start off with our district strategic plan that we put together with all the various stakeholders about 5 years ago. We create district initiatives which get voted on by the school committee, and all of our professional development is tied up in that. And next year, our initiatives, we're going to be continuing with the literacy professional development, which is the science of reading. I'm not going to go into tons of detail on it, but it's a huge shift in what we had currently been doing. We used to teach what they call a balanced literacy. Is it Maya Angelou who said, once you know, how does it go, Jenny? When you know more, or how does it go? When you know better, you do better. So we know better now how to teach kids reading. There's actually a science to it. And so this year is our first year where we are actually training our teachers on how to teach reading scientifically, which is a huge shift. We're working with Hill for Literacy, which is a DESE recommended support system on how to go through the steps to get our kids reading. Our plan, and if we do it well, we should have 85% of our kids reading at grade level if you're using a high quality instructional materials, which we purchased 2 years ago, and we're teaching effectively with small group instruction. So that is a big goal for us because since I've been here, our teachers have worked hard, they teach hard, they care about their kids, but our reading has never been where it should be. And so with this initiative, I said, usually we do 3-year initiatives, but I said to Jenny, if we need to go longer, this is the most fundamental skill we teach our children. We need to go longer. We need to get 85% of our kids at K&1 reading at grade level so that they can reach their academic fulfillment in our upper grades. To teach with this science of reading, the teachers have to use data. They have to use data to decide who they're going to be teaching in their small groups, what it is that their students need in front of them. So we call that data-informed teaching practices. It sounds simple, but it's really prescriptive, and it really is the next step of giving kids individualized instruction to meet their needs where they are. We're going to continue with our trauma and culturally responsive informed practices, working to make our school a place where all students feel safe and have that sense of belonging. And we're also working, as you see with the science of reading, the multi-tiered system of support, which means we give our kids what they need when they need it in the classroom. And if most of our kids do fine on a tier 1, but some of our kids are going to need tier 2. Some of our students need tier 3. And as you know, we brought in, and you'll see in a few minutes, some interventionists to help support any learning loss or learning gaps that could have happened during the COVID pandemic. As we go into this budget, we had a look at our foundation enrollment over time. We know we had a study a couple of years ago that said that our district, they anticipated seeing a declining enrollment. Well, as you can see, from FY21 to FY23, we've lost 114 students just in 2 years. So this year, our foundation budget is at 1301, which, as you can see, the line graph is steadily decreasing. With that, a few years ago, someone asked, can you break that up by each of the 3 towns? So I did a 3-year study for the net loss. So from FY21 to FY23, there's a net loss of 99 students in the town of Southwick, an 8 student loss in the town of Tolland, and a 5 student loss in the town of Granville. And now we're going to be moving on to the budget presentation, which is the money portion. So every year I give you the fixed cost increases. These are the increases that we don't have any control over. These are our health insurance, our salary and wage adjustments, our out-of-district vocational tuitions, school choice, pensions, and retirement contractual obligations. I want you to notice something here. Our out-of-district vocational tuitions this year went up $287,000. That is a dramatic increase in what we have been paying. It used to maybe be 40,000 increase. Sometimes it was a decline, but we have more and more of our students who are opting to go to Smith Agricultural Vocational School and also Westfield Technical Academy for programs that are not currently offered at the C-Tech program here in town. And we are obligated to send them. If we don't offer it at our C-Tech program, then they can go to one of these other programs. The group health insurance, it went up 122,000. I'll have Steve speak to that in a minute. It's not as significant because we had a insurance payment holiday the previous year. So it looks like it went up a lot, but it didn't go up as much as it really did because we had a holiday. Okay, one more. And what are we doing with these ESSER funds that we receive? So in the budget that you have in front of you, these positions are positions that we have currently in our school district, but they are not positions that we had in our budget before, because we're not going to hit you with a financial cliff. Okay, so we're using our ESSER funds to accelerate learning. So we do have 2 interventionists at Powder Mill School. They are dealing with reading loss and math loss. And I can't remember if we talked about the right just-in-time teaching. What the interventionists are doing is through the work of our coaches, the coaches are getting data. They're telling the interventionists what specifically these students need in order to access grade level material before it's taught. So our interventionists are giving our students some pre-teaching before they actually have access to the grade level content. We did hire a 504 coordinator this year. We are going to continue with 3 building-based substitutes. We have 2 positions in Woodland Unit 8 positions, and we have a nurse floater. Depending on where the COVID pandemic is going, we may or may not need that nurse floater next year in the ESSER funds, and it can be attached to something else. But for right now, without knowing where the direction of COVID is, we're just keeping it in there to be safe. The good news that I want to share with you is we're also using it to offset major capital improvements. What does that mean for you as the finance committee and as taxpayers? It means we're not going to be coming to you to ask to borrow money for the HVAC system upgrade at Woodland, for the Wi-Fi system upgrade campus-wide, for the expansion of the key door access and the outdoor speaker system at Woodland. And on the last capital page, we have the totals of what that costs. And just for an example, the HVAC system at Woodland is $541,000 that we won't be coming to the taxpayers or coming to the towns to borrow. The Wi-Fi system upgrade, $175,000 that we won't be coming to you to ask to borrow. Expansion of the key card door access, $90,000. And our outdoor speaker system, $50,000. So we are using our ESSER funds to offset future debt borrowing in the future. Now I'll turn it over to Steve.
Thanks, Jen. Good evening, everybody. I think I know most everyone here. Couple points I wanted to make before getting into the weeds a little bit on the FY23 budget proposal. The FY23 budget requires some pretty significant increases to assessments to the all three towns. Pretty modest with Tallinn, but Southwick certainly seeing a very large increase, and Granville seeing an increase as well. One thing you need to bear in mind as you consider that is that from FY21 to FY22, the assessments actually decreased by over $250,000. That's almost unheard of in public education, public sector. Total appropriations, so that the appropriation portion of our budget is what the committee will vote on and the towns will approve at the annual town meeting. That decreased by $385,000 or almost 1.5%. So from FY21 to FY22, there was this pretty significant dip in what we were coming to the towns for spending. A lot of that was driven by reduced spending during some of the peak periods of COVID. There were certain things that just weren't happening the way they were prior to, and that allowed for some savings. There was also augmentation of our financial resources through a lot of grant funding. So Jen mentioned the ESSER grants, ESSER 2, ESSER 3. There were a bunch of other ones before that, Coronavirus Relief Fund. It was one that was targeted specifically toward technology. The remote learning technology education grant or something. So there was a lot of money that came in, which allowed us to back off on the assessments. In addition, the required contributions that is determined by the Chapter 70 formula, the foundation budget and Chapter 70 calculation. Those numbers went down as well. And that was in Governor Baker's original budget back in January of 2021. The legislature didn't approve the state budget until July, late July maybe. And by the time that got approved, I think there was more clarity around the financial picture with the state. And actually the minimum local contributions for all three towns went up. We don't come back to the towns. The tradition or the history with the regional school district is we don't come back to the towns saying, hey, your minimum contribution went up. We need an extra 50,000 or 100,000. We live with whatever the number was that was agreed to. But what you're going to see this year is we already have ground to make up from what the real number was that got settled in July by the legislature. So an already depressed minimum local contribution that was in place for FY22 based on the data that we had back in January and throughout the spring. So we have that ground to make up. And then this year, the state is implementing, DESE is implementing the Student Opportunity Act. So if we've probably mentioned this at some of the other budget hearings that we've done, presentations. Back in the fall of 2019, after a long study commission was in place, there were a number of changes. There was legislation that was passed, which basically the goal of that was to increase the rates that were being used to determine what the foundation budget should be for students across the Commonwealth. Really, certain categories of spending that they were trying to get at that had been kind of underfunded over time. So when ed reform came in and this foundation budget mechanism was created, Chapter 70 formula, dealing with certain rates, certain spending levels by school districts across the state. But as time went on, some of that got skewed and was woefully underfunded. So the Student Opportunity Act aims to correct the rates that are used for things like benefits and fixed charges, guidance and psychological social services for students, special education out of district costs. What they were using in the formula was just not adequate to cover the growth in the cost of those types of things. Also, English language learners, there's a significant additional cost that districts incur to get those students up to where they need to be. So that's addressed in the Student Opportunity Act, as is low income students. So students who are, particularly districts who have a lot of low income students, there's more funding that's needed in order to support those kids and give them a chance, an equitable chance in their school. So this is the first year that DESE in earnest is implementing the Student Opportunity Act changes to the foundation budget formula. And so while it's not really going to result in us seeing any more money from the state in terms of Chapter 70 funding, but it is going to raise our foundation budget. So the foundation budget, which they look at all the students who come to the district and have them in various categories based on our data reporting, and they're doing this for every district across the state. As they begin to apply these new rates, and this is a phase-in over 7 years, the effect of that is going to be to increase that foundation budget. Because we're a hold harmless district, we're already receiving more state aid than we're entitled to under the formula. We're not going to see any upside to state funding. However, when they perform the minimum local contribution calculation for each of the towns in our region, that number is going to climb, and they're going to be expecting the towns to pony up their share toward the additional or increased costs associated with implementation of the Student Opportunity. Eventually, the amount of additional state aid that we receive, that's going to shrink. And if you go play this way out into the future, there might be some additional funding. But in the short term, everything we've looked at, we don't see any upside to this in the way of state funding. The only thing that they did do, well, there was actually a couple of things. They did, it does contain a provision to get some money back for special ed circuit breaker claims where transportation is involved. So if we have to transport a student, a high cost student out of district to a special school, previously the transportation costs associated with that were not covered under this circuit breaker program that the state has, where they'll provide you with some financial assistance for those costs. They've now layered transportation. So we'll begin to be able to make those. The other side to that, what was the $30? Yes, $30. It's so inconsequential that it's easy to forget. There's a $30 per capita increase that the state is funding.
There it is.
You'll see it right here. So with our chapter 70, you can see it's a pretty flat line here. These are the increases annually. Last year it was $39,630. This year we've got a few less students, so it's $39,030. So it's a $30 per student increase, and that's built into the Student Opportunity Act. Previously, you had to rely on the goodwill of the legislature and whether they thought they had enough money to fund some foundation aid or not. And so most years they provided something, and it ranged anywhere from $25 to $40. They've codified it now where it's a $30 per student. So I just wanted to get some of those comments out because it kind of frames what we have to do in terms of the budget, some of the things that are driving the budget, some of the things that are driving the assessments that we have to pass on to the three towns. So Amy, if you could go back, actually, if you want to say, good. So yeah, actually, why don't we go to the budget summary? So I want to talk about the expenditures, and this is pretty small for you guys to see here on the screen, but I'm just going to focus for now on the expenditure side and talk about a few of the categories of expense and what's driving those numbers, and then we'll talk about how we're covering that with assessments and other revenue. So that top line on the expenditures, the general administration, the increase there is basically exclusively it's us and our need to park more money in our salary reserve account because we're in negotiations with our teachers union right now. So that's in process. The salaries and wages that are reflected in the cost centers in this budget proposal reflect this year's rate. So obviously we have people moving through steps and potentially moving to different columns, but it does not reflect any type of cost of living adjustment or rate increase based on a negotiated contract, which is taking place right now. We need to be prepared for that because that will happen. And our practice is to park some funds in the general admin portion, the salary reserve account. We obviously can't talk in too much specifics about that because it's part of a negotiation process, but that accounts really for really all of that increase. We're seeing some decreases in certain categories of expense within general admin and modest increases in others, but can really attribute it all to the need to account for increases there as opposed to in the actual cost center areas. The employee benefits, Jen mentioned the increase to employee group health insurance. For FY22, so the current fiscal year, our insurer, we're with the Maya Health Trust. They passed along a premium holiday, a 1 month, where they didn't charge us premium. So that was shared because we're a 50-50 employer-employee contribution district. That was shared equally with the employees. But pass those savings along to the 3 towns. That was one of the things that helped us pass along a reduction in assessments last year. We don't have that for, at least it hasn't been shared with us as of yet for FY23. So we need to account for 12 months of the district share of employee health insurance. So that's why we're seeing, that's the bulk of the increase there. There is also a fairly modest increase to the pension assessment for the Hamden County retirement system. And that makes, those two things make up over almost 95% of the increase to employee benefits. Jen mentioned the tuition, particularly the out of district vocational. We are seeing tremendous growth in the interest in those programs. Our official Chapter 74 vocational program, the Lower Pioneer Valley Educational Collaborative's Career Tech program, or CTech, as we like to call it. Numbers are pretty flat there, but when it comes to those out-of-district schools, Westfield Technical Academy and Smith Voc and Agricultural High School in Northampton, there's just been a significant uptick in the number of students who are attending, who are expressing an interest in attending for the programs that are the unique programs that are available at those schools. We're also seeing an uptick in the school choice out of district. So we still have very strong school choice participation numbers, more students attending our district from out of district. But we have seen a change where we are seeing a larger number going out of district from ours. So still positive in terms of more money coming into us from the school choice program than we have to spend going out. But that is between school choice and the vocational out of district tuition. That's what's driving the increase there. We do try to account for a lot of these vocational out of district costs through some revolving accounts, or a school choice revolving account typically takes the brunt of that. Maintenance is a pretty flat increase there, 2.5%. Most of that really just to accommodate the contractual salary adjustments and increases. Student transportation is up 98,000. That encompasses all of the transportation, with the exception of things like athletics and some field trips that are carried in other sections of the budget. But seeing some increases to both regular ed transportation, special ed transportation, vocational ed transportation, and for the current year, we failed to account for the insurance, the auto insurance costs associated with the vehicles that we lease to the Lower Pioneer Valley Educational Collaborative, because we're still the owner on that vehicle. The way this is working is we're on the hook for the insurance. It's not a big number. We're anticipating $12,000 for next year. That's one of the factors that's driving the increase to the transportation number. The collaborative also had negotiated increases for drivers. And so that's really the thing that's most responsible for the increase to that cost. Yeah, so we have, again, the list at the bottom, so below the line, the grants and various revolving accounts that we can bring to bear to help mitigate costs to the communities. Seems to be, it's just growing. There used to be 3 or 4 items, and with some of the ESSER grant, and the reason you see the TBD for the ESSER grant is we don't know yet which of the capital projects we're going to be able to bring to life in FY23. So we're still working on that. We'll get a number there prior to the annual town meetings, but at this point, it's still a little bit of a moving target. You know, the heavy off, so the grants aren't changing much. There's very little change there. Circuit breaker revolving account, not too much, but a very heavy reliance on our school choice revolving account. I would say we work hard at trying to manage some of these accounts and some of our resources for sustainability so that we have a healthy number there that we can bring to bear every year, as opposed to, using it up in 1 year and then we don't have it the next year, creating a funding cliff, fiscal cliff that Jen referred to. That doesn't happen everywhere. There's some horror stories you hear of districts where they get some funds and they have a program they want to do and they just spend it all, and then that funding source dries up or it changes, and they don't have the ability to continue that, or if they want to continue it, they need to make other changes, cuts, reduce staffing, cut back on programs. So we work hard. We pay a lot of attention to trying to manage and maintain these funds for sustainability, and we've managed to do that with our school choice revolving account. That fund balance at the end of fiscal 21 set at $1.6 million. We're using an unprecedented amount of that for FY23 to help offset some of these increased costs in vocational and some of our special ed out of district costs, tuitions. And also our rural school aid grant, which is something that seems to have some regularity now. We never used to even bother showing that because we never knew about it until usually after the budget passed. It seems to be a regular occurrence now. The best information we have is it's going to be about 110,000 again this year, and we're using that also to help pay for our out of district vocational tuitions. Because some of the reasons that our out of district vocational kids are choosing certain paths, career paths, really has to do with the agricultural nature in some cases of the community. So the Smith Vocational and Agricultural High School has some programs that are just very unique, not offered at CTEC, probably never be offered at CTEC because of the makeup of the communities in the collaborative. But it does fit a niche for some of our students, and they're able to fulfill their goals and dreams. So it's neat that they have that opportunity, but it does come with a cost, and parking some funds in some revolving accounts is a way that we can do that and have it not affect the assessments to the 3 count, and see that kind of spiking from year to year as the numbers change. The increases or decreases to the cost centers. Insurance, we're seeing a small decrease there. Really, that's one of the savings resulting from transportation being outsourced to the collaborative. So our workers' comp coverage or workers' comp premium is down considerably. We've got some credits that we can apply next year as a result of that. So we're anticipating a lower number there. Our technology lease, we're continuing to ramp up. We talked in past years about our one-to-one initiative. That's been a rousing success. And thankfully, we started it when we did because we were poised and positioned to deal with a lot of what the pandemic threw at us with remote and hybrid learning environments. So I don't know if that was skill or dumb luck, but we're glad we did that, and we got the support from the committee and our 3 communities. So we're still in the ramp up phase of that. We had predicted a while back that we were going to be somewhere between I believe it was $250 and $300,000 when fully phased in. We're thinking now it might take another year after this to be fully phased in, and it will probably top off at somewhere around 250 to 275. So a little bit under where we thought it might end up. And essentially the one-to-one aspect of that is fully phased in, but there are some other end user applications, devices that we still need to do some labs where certain that the small laptops aren't going to be sufficient. So we have a few of those that we have to still do. And those will be accomplished over the next couple of years. And you'll see that technology lease line ramp up just a slight bit more. Debt service is pretty flat. The debt service on the school building project, that ebbs and flows by, usually under 0.5% from year to year. And it just really has to do with the amortization table on the bonds, the repayment schedule. The Woodland School budget is reflecting a decrease, as is Powder Mill. Southwick Regional School, very modest 0.65% increase, and special education at 2.5% increase. So, sure.
I just wanted to also, it's on the highlights page, but we did look at the overall budget this year. We looked at enrollment, and we did make some difficult decisions, and we did have to cut 4.5 FTE positions from the budget. So we are not bringing forward a level service budget. The budget that we're bringing forward to you today has eliminated 4.5 FTE positions in the district. Yes.
And that's really why you're seeing some decreases there, or mitigated increases. The other thing that we have, which again we've always tried to manage it at the highest level that we can, because it's a way that we help the 3 towns with offsetting assessments, is our excess and deficiency account. It's akin to the free cash account with municipalities, but we have limits on how much we can maintain there. So we're limited to 5% of the ensuing year's budget. So at the end of fiscal 21, we could have no more than 5% of the FY22 budget sitting in our E&D account. We actually came in at $16,000 over the E&D limit. So that $16,000 has to be returned prorationally to all 3 towns. So that'll be coming either in the form of a reduced payment for the last quarter of this fiscal year, or with a small reduction to next year's assessment. Thought I should share that good news with you guys.
Thank you very much. I can't wait to tell the taxpayers.
But the real good news is that we've got a very healthy and robust E&D account, which allows us to again contribute. And you'll see when we look at the revenue portion of this budget, another significant amount. And again, it also positions us for, should there be an occurrence of some sort, that some disaster that we need funds for, rather the 3 towns have to approve any spending from E&D. So we do have to go back to the 3 towns, and the select boards would either approve that or put it for the voters' approval, or choose not to hold a special town meeting. And the school committee's access to those funds would be approved that way. But what it wouldn't mean is you have to go back to we had to come to you for something. You'd have to go to the voters, potentially increase taxes or dip into your free cash. By having this healthy E&D balance, it allows us, you're probably never going to see that scenario. So if we had to access it, we'd come to the towns, school committee would vote on it, we'd go to the towns would make a decision about whether or not it was appropriate for the district to access the E&D funds. It would mean any additional assessment to the 3 towns. In the sense that it is your money, you get to vote on any utilization of of E&D. And that's why it appears in the budget proposal when the budget's approved with these revenue numbers. It's an approval of the use of E&D. So on the revenue side, the assessments are increasing by a little over $1 million from the current year to next year. And that's a function of obviously some increased spending, $856,000 or 3.32% over the current year's appropriations, but also some decreasing revenue sources. So when you combine those two things, they add up to the $1,015,000 in increased assessments that get passed on to the three towns. $188,000 of that assessment is discretionary. So the rest of it is all non-discretionary, either minimum local contribution or non-discretionary assessments for things like transportation and capital. In our case, the debt service on the capital projects that we've done over the years, including the school building project. So that is a hefty number, but again, most of it is coming to you in the form of non-discretionary assessments. So there's not much of a way around the vast majority of that. Our Medicaid reimbursement, aside from the assessment side of it, the Medicaid reimbursement, so flat number. You don't expect to see any growth there anytime soon. The regional transportation reimbursement is down by $43,000. At least Governor Baker's proposal, it's down $43,000. Mass Association of Regional Schools and districts across the state are all lobbying the legislature to bump that number back up. We'll see if they have any success. But with what we know right now, we have to go forward with that, with Governor Baker's number of 804,000. In FY22, we gave Southwick, based on the state budget as it was proposed at the time, had an opportunity to access the ESSER 2 grant for offsetting increases to minimum local contribution. Southwick was the only town, I think, of the three for FY22 that was seeing an increase to their minimum local contribution. We went to the select board and said, here, it was an $86,000 increase to minimum local contribution. You can access the ESSER 2 grant for that. And the town took us up on that offer. As it turned out, when the budget got settled in July of 2021, they removed that provision. So technically you weren't entitled to it, but again, we don't go back and look for any of that back, but we're not able to offer that again this year. So that's some more ground that we need to make up. Again, the increase to Chapter 78 is that $39,000 that comes to us by the $30 per student. Chapter 78. Charter tuition reimbursement is going down, but the good news there is also the charter tuition that we're assessed by the state, that went down by an even larger amount. So net-wise there, it was to the good for the district and for our three towns. And the revenue that we get from leasing our vehicles to the collaborative to operate our transportation, the number of vehicles that we own that they're using is shrinking, and I think it's just next year and the year after, and then they will own all of it. Basically, it's like a lease purchase arrangement. But the number of vehicles and these are simply the vehicles that we still have debt service on. So we could not sell them to the collaborative outright. We would have realized all that revenue in 1 year, and then wouldn't have had it available to offset the debt service payments that we have on the vehicles borrowed to pay for them. So we've scheduled all that out and have more money coming in than we have in remaining debt service payments, but it's a declining number every year. So that number drops by 56,000 in FY23. By FY20, I think FY25 would be the last year that there'd be any revenue coming in. But there also would be no debt service on any of the vehicles. So they would all be owned by the collaborative. So that's some of the more nitty gritty on the numbers and the budget, what's driving that. Let's go back to the presentation.
Can you go to 14? So the highlights to the budget. So the talking points to the budget, because Steve just went way down, and I'm going to go back up here. So when you look at the budget, we brought to you a budget that had some ESER 2 and 3 grant funded positions. Again, these positions are not, besides the 504 coordinator, the other positions we will be eliminating once the ESER funds are gone. So these are not positions that we plan on just putting right into the budget. We are in full implementation mode of our one-to-one device initiative that we spoke about a few years ago, that we knew we were going to have to put into the operating budget. We used to have a lot of it in the capital budget, and we were moving it from the capital budget into the operating budget because we were moving away from purchasing them and moving towards leasing. Again, we were able to significantly offset the budget with E&D. In my earlier years, we would put in about 550, maybe 600,000 with E&D. Last year, we did bump it up to 875. And this year we were able to keep it at 875 as well. And also we're able to offset the budget with, again, about a $100,000 increase in our school choice funds to help. What's the driving factor to our budget besides those other fixed cost increases? Again, as Steve said, we love seeing our kids fulfill their dreams, but it does come with a cost. And so we do have a significant increase to our out-of-district vocational tuitions. We do have an increase to school choice out of district. We're seeing an increase in our students who started in the virtual academies last year, and they're continuing to stay in that remote. We don't offer a remote learning plan in our district. We saw it last year. We're continuing to see our students who went to the virtual schools stay there. And again, in this budget, we do have a 4.5 FTE positions that have been cut. So again, it's not a level service. We did make some cuts based on where we thought we could make cuts due to our declining enrollment and needs across the district. And the last page is our capital needs. Again, previous years, we come to with about a 600,000 request to borrow money. Again, we're trying not to do that. We're trying to be smart, be fiscally conscious, and use some of those ESER funds to upgrade our capital projects that we had on our 5-year capital plan. So the only thing we're looking for this year is we anticipate requesting to borrow $200,000, which is significantly less than what we used to ask when we had to buy school buses. It's even less than what we asked for last year. And we're trying to do what we can. So under these positions, under these improvements right here, this is ESER funded, and we will not be asking to borrow money for these projects in the future, which when you add it up comes to about $900,000 that we're not putting on the taxpayer with our ESER funds. And with that, I say, thank you. Do you have any questions for Steve and myself? Ted?
So Steve, caught my attention early in your presentation, we're going up 8%. And you're saying that's the Educate and Opportunity Grant. This is just the first of 7 years of increases. Are they all going to be 8%? I know you don't have a crystal ball, but what percentage of that 8% is the Educate and Opportunity bill, and how much of that is the rest of the study?
I don't know that off the top of my head, Ted. It might be possible to drill down into the numbers and get some sense of that.
I think all three councils want to know that number for
yeah.
planning. This is the first of a 7-year hit.
Yeah.
We gotta do something different, right?
It's an interesting thing because statewide, they want to print off I think it's.
I saw it.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah. It's too small for me to see on my glasses. Statewide enrollment is down. Yeah, I mean, it's down in our district. A lot of the students that they thought were going to come back after the pandemic didn't come back. They're doing different things. And Jed mentioned our school choice, and a lot of that increase is driven by the virtual type thing. So, you know, I think they're still thinking people will eventually come back. But even with a decline in statewide enrollment of 3.26%, the foundation budget went up by statewide foundation went up by 257 million or 2.21% just on things that were driven by the student opportunity. So declining enrollment, but rising costs.
I can see it right here. I mean, where your $28 million budget divided by 1,300 students is $21,000 almost per student. That's huge.
Yeah.
All right, question 2, Smith Vogue. You know, if you hammer them for having education programs, they're also the only Vogue school that has a plumbing program.
Mm-hmm.
And we have some students go for plumbing. So
yeah,
a couple farmers, please.
Yeah.
No, we think it's wonderful that our kids have the opportunity to go there.
Yeah, I think you got a couple kids are doing plumbing.
The union's got that messed up, so you can't have another plumbing program anywhere else.
Yeah.
So the only plumbing program. We need more plumbers. I don't know if anybody else gets called back from a plumber. I don't. I'd like more to go there.
Yes.
So I'm sorry if possible, but we need plumbers. That's the only.
Yeah.
In Western Mass to go right.
So ironically, I did, I had a Lower Pioneer Valley Educational Collaborative meeting this morning, and it's one of the things I did mention this morning to the director. You know, we need to be looking at bringing more programs to our technical programs. So I did get an answer. So they had 3 phases of when they were doing their renovations. Phase 3 was supposed to be an electrical, plumbing, and HVAC area with it was going to cost $35 million. So they couldn't afford to do it at that time. So they had looked at it, but it needs specific requirements. It needs certain building heights. But we are going to be looking at in our next Lower Pioneer Valley meeting about what are the programs that our kids leaving us for, because we want to keep our kids. So we're going to look at some that can potentially go into a classroom and maybe even offer something like criminal justice that's brand new that none of the other programs around here offer to maybe lure some more kids to the C-Tech program. So.
Can I do one more? I don't know if anybody else is pitching, but I have one more on the English program you started off with, saying you're going to revamp English and do English.
Reading.
Reading. Even better, reading. Just looking at the MCAS scores, I always have to make my MCAS comment, but I mean, math and science get hammered here. It looks like we had 15% switch from the high end to the low end of the MCAS score, from meeting or above to not meeting or below. And over that, 22% switch from the meeting and above to not meeting and below in science, just over 2020, 2021. Math science, that's my thing.
Ours as well. We just started a new math initiative. I'm trying to think, is that the 2021? That was the year we gave the abbreviated MCAS and they weren't counted towards, but we had a lot of people opt out that year as well, Ted. We had a lot of people opt out of the MCAS that year, which really is no opt out, but if the child says I'm not taking the test, then they're not taking the test.
My son did okay on the MCAS for science last year, so he's better than okay, but I don't know.
Yeah.
It's a little bit surprising. I think, you know, some of the online stuff goes pretty well. Teachers should be commended. I think they're doing a good job.
They really are.
And the number first on the education opportunity bill, whatever that's going to be, if you could just get this.
Yeah, I'll at least find out if it's possible to drill down to find out what that meant by town. Because they don't necessarily share it with us that way.
Just for the district.
Yeah,
it looks
okay.
Like we're using the South Lake, so
yeah,
whatever it is, it sucks.
Yeah, yeah. There's definitely a great factor that they're applying.
Just round number.
Yeah,
2 or 3%. Just one thing. It's 5, 6, 7. then I think.
Yeah, no, the growth of that foundation, but I had done a bar graph quite a few years ago that showed, you know, kind of where it is today, and then with whatever these increases were going to be, with our enrollment being pretty flat, where it was likely to go. It was pretty staggering. And it's putting some money in some areas that were woefully inadequate. The downside to us, and I think really with most districts, very few districts are seeing an upside financially to it from state resources.
Right.
It's really falling on the local communities. There are some who are getting
Thank you very much.
Yeah, there are some who are getting, you know, quite a big increase, but there's a lot fewer of them than there are who are just seeing increases to the foundation budget, which have to then be borne mostly by the towns or cities.
If I could just circle back to Ted's second question, so it's my first question when we were looking at all this, on the vocational school aspect. If you guys could put together for us a list of the programs that we're using kids to, that we don't offer at CTEC, and you know, maybe it is time to really be thinking about investing more in CTEC and figure out what we can do there to, you know, keep our kids here, but also draw in kids from somewhere else. Because that number's only going on.
That's correct.
One of the other aspects to this, and some of you may have seen it, so I know it was a group that was reaching out to really select boards and finance committees. I think is the state reimburses the numbers down this year, but they had been making some pretty good strides on increasing the regional transportation reimbursement. So anybody who lives more than 1.5 miles from the school, they're supposed to reimburse us 100%. They really typically.
Yeah, we got that in.
Yeah, so we get reimbursed virtually nothing for the vocational kids who are going out of district, and
Northampton's far away.
Yeah, it's a long ride and it's extra cost. It's wear and tear on the kids as much as the vehicles and the drivers. So maybe there could be some relief down in the future on that, but another way to do it is to offer more opportunities or things that kids would be interested in.
I mean, it's just personally, I would love to see those numbers of how many kids we're losing to what. Because I think long term, we probably really need to be looking at CTEC and how to make it better.
Yeah, I will say this though, we're coming out of a period where we had historically low enrollment in out of district vocational programs. So it was actually started prior to Jen coming on board, but she was tasked with enforcing it, and that is saying you have to go attend your chapter 74, official chapter 74 school, which is the LPVEX CTEC program. And it has to be, you know, if you want to go to Westfield Tech, there's going to be a reason for it. And so we had historically high numbers at Westfield Tech and usually just 1 or 2 at Smith. And those declined pretty dramatically over the last 5-6 years. But it bottomed out a couple of years ago, and now it's ticking back up. And we weren't quite prepared for that because it had kind of changed.
The world's changing.
So I can tell you, so our 12th graders, we have 5 that go to out of district technical. We have 4 11th graders. We have 2 10th, I'm sorry, go back. We have 3 12th graders. We have 7 11th graders. We have 4 10th graders. And this year we had 12 9th graders. And that's where we saw that huge hit that we weren't prepared for in the budget, because they don't give us their chapter 74 programs. They're not due until April 1st. So when we have to put this budget to you, we kind of do our best guesstimate based on what we've received so far, what the trends have been. And so if it goes up like it did last year, we use rural school aid to cover it this year.
And to Nicole's point, specifically what programs are they attracted to?
I can get
You know,
that.
we know it's plumbing, we know it's
Animal
forestry and
science,
ag,
aviation.
we know it's aviation,
Yeah.
you know,
Web
are there
design.
others? Web design.
Right, and while the demographics don't necessarily fit CTEC for some of those things, a lot of those things should be possible. You know, especially something like web design.
Exactly.
But that's what I was asking about today.
Totally.
That's a
Yes.
no-brainer.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'd rather invest the money that we're sending out of district in our own.
Yeah,
I agree. And keeping our children here.
Right.
I agree.
Yeah, I don't think they need a $35 million building for web design.
Right.
They don't. We talked about that today. That was what we talked about. What programs could we do
86 inch
in
screens that are
Right.
a classroom? Because they do have
But
classrooms there.
aviation, that's a huge
Yeah,
program.
we're
to
not,
build.
yeah.
But what? Come on,
Yeah.
we can do that.
We can. We-
But, so that was my first. My second is to the 4.5 positions. I know we have decreasing enrollment.
Mhm.
Are those classroom teachers?
Can't specifically say who they are. 3 are through retirement.
And with our declining enrollment, are we going to see an impact on classes?
So no, we're going to be actually doing school choice numbers next week. And so all of our class sizes at Woodland are still 18 and under. So
eliminating those 4.5, we should, combined with our decreasing enrollment, we should see an increase in classes.
correct. And the other thing I was looking at today was I was looking at school choice numbers. I kind of did like a Jen Willard analysis of school choice in and out, just to kind of wrap my head around it, because I was trying to figure out what was going on. And when you look at what we used to accept for school choice in so for example, in 4th grade right now, we have 11 school choice students in. In 5th grade, we have 9. In 6th, we have 11. In 7, we have 15. In 8, we have 14. In 9, we have 13. But we had a limit due to COVID, the number of school choice seats that we've offered. So in kindergarten this year, we only have 4. We only opened up 5 seats. In 1st grade, we have 5. And in 2nd grade, we have 7. In 3rd grade, we have 5. So we're seeing the school choice because we want to keep our class sizes small. If we take in too many kids via school choice, then we run into the number of not necessarily needing another teacher, but bumping up class size so they're not at that ideal number. So it's a real balancing game when we look at school choice, whether we don't have enough for another teacher, but I also don't want to bump our class sizes too much because it's a priority for us. So it's kind of, do you keep your class school choice numbers low or do you hire another teacher? Yeah.
Jen, do we have an opportunity with COVID going away and getting back to normal? Are we anticipating being able to have more school choice positions open next year? Like for the next school
We're
year?
still at about 5 kids per grade. It gets greater up at the regional schools because they have much more flexibility in the scheduling.
Because I mean, from a financial perspective, Steve, I mean, that's a good thing, right? If we have more kids coming in from out of district.
Yes,
from a
yes,
financial
yes.
Perspective.
Yes, but you don't want just 3 more in or 4 more in.
Because that won't pay for another
Teacher.
No, absolutely, I
And
understand
it just
that.
increases class. So it's a fine line. It's in kindergarten is always a yes. And we can always open more once we have enrollment at the end of the summer, like we did last year when you approved additional school choice seats in kindergarten. But our priority is always to our students in our district.
Class size is declining coming in at the kindergarten.
Drastically, yes. Yeah. We used to graduate classes of 120. With school choice, we have about 90 kids in kindergarten. I think 98 is the highest in grade 2 down at Woodland.
It often surprises people when, when they find out that, oh, you work in Southwick, oh, you must have a lot of kids, must be growth in the schools and really just not seeing that. I mean, it hasn't been all 3 towns. I mean, it's been, if you go back 20, 25 years, it's just a slow, steady decline.
We also don't have the building.
Correct.
My kids were in those 125
right.
classes and it was a building pool in the moratorium.
Right, and a lot of the people who are moving in to Sawgrass and to what's the other one? They have the big houses, but they don't have a lot of kids. People just aren't having a lot of kids anymore. So as a mother of four, I can appreciate that, but
in Granville, like we don't really have any growth, but Southwood, where all these people sending their kids with all these houses.
A lot of the people that are buying the houses are older people who are buying the ranches at Sawgrass. That's who's buying them. They're downsizing from their big houses. I know a couple of people who've downsized from their big houses and they moved in there for the ranch because they're beautiful ranches.
Not the big houses they sold for some. Oh, live there.
Oh, I know. Not that golf course. I'm talking where the country club was.
But that's something we're seeing throughout Western Massachusetts.
Everywhere.
Yeah, like,
Mhm.
it's not unique. It's not unique to us. That's why they're closing a lot of schools
Mhm.
in Western Massachusetts.
Mhm.
And statewide. Some of that is the move to private schools, the move to virtual academies, things like that. The return was lower and slower than a lot of people were hoping or expecting.
And just another informational purposes, in case you were wondering, we did have our Lower Pioneer Valley Educational Collaborative reach out to the state to see if we could do a 7-school virtual option so that we could keep our students who are going to the Greenfield Virtual School or TECA. They said, as of right now, the answer is no. It can only be a virtual school or remote learning in a specific district. It can't be multiple districts. As of right now, we're trying to think creatively. We're trying to think outside the box, but right now, that's where we are with that.
So they're going to a specific school district that has a remote.
No, they stay home and they do remote learning either through the TECA. I can't tell you what it stands for, but it's a virtual school. So they go to school with kids all over the state, but they stay home. Or they go to the Greenfield Virtual School. So they're still learning at home, but they're enrolled at one of these virtual schools.
Oh, so it's not like a school district that has a virtual program,
No.
so they're attending like their schools, their teachers.
All over the state, yep.
Do you see that changing in the future?
We're gonna advocate for it, for our collaborative. It's the problem, none of us have enough to operate our own virtual school with the requirements that the state is telling us we need to have. We need to have our own principal. It's got to be its own school code. It'd have to have its own MCAS. It's a huge undertaking. And for districts our size, it's just not attainable.
So our school kids that are doing virtual school within our district, like they can't school choice into like Westfield virtual school?
No, you have to. That's correct.
So it's not homeschooling.
Oh, did I say homeschooling?
No, but I'm saying it's not.
No, it's not. It's absolutely is not.
When they do homeschooling, the parents usually get some kind of program, follow the program.
It's remote learning.
And Jen, it's too early. Are we getting any sort of indication yet on homeschool kids, with the increase that we saw over the last 2 years? Are we seeing any sort of indication whether those numbers are going to stay static or are we going to see a decline now that the masks are off and everybody's back in school? And
it's funny, actually, it came out in the superintendent listserv that said, does anybody have a cutoff date for when you enroll homeschool students? We're not seeing that. But some school districts are seeing it. Like I know Worthington is seeing an increase in students who want to come back from homeschool without the masks. So.
And we won't know until really the fall, right?
Correct. Well, if that's it, I'm going to let you all go home and enjoy your night. It's beautiful out there. I just want to thank all the principals and administrators for being here today. A lot of work goes on behind the scenes from them, their input. Michelle Grisey, I can't tell you how much she does by running numbers for us and getting us all the information that goes into this. So I just want to shout out to Michelle. Thank you for the work you do behind the scenes. I appreciate it.